Well, hello and welcome back to Chased by Grace. My name is Lee Robinson. I am your host. At Chased by Grace, we have people come in and share their stories about how people have experienced the grace of God, the pursuing love of God in their lives. And we have a very special guest tonight. We'll introduce him in just a minute. I want to share with you from Psalm chapter 23. King David wrote this psalm when he was being chased by the king and to take his life. The king was very jealous of David, and David found himself in caves on the run, and he penned this all-famous psalm, Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd." But at the end of the psalm, he finished it by saying this: "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And the wording there, he said surely, meaning he had this confidence, this deep assurance that God's mercy, his faithfulness, and his goodness was going to be, he says follow, but it really means to be chasing after him. Other places the word is translated to hunt down. He had this assurance that God knew who he was, and God was committed to chasing him down, to lavish on David his love and his faithfulness in David's life. One of the most important things about that instance when David wrote that was, remember, he was being chased down for his life. He was in caves. He was being lied about. He was being, and negative things were totally surrounding his life. And yet through that, he had the confidence that God is here. God is going to pull me through. God is going to win here. And ultimately, we see in David's life, yes, God brought him out. God exposed the lies about him. God exalted him as king. God has used David's life and David's story for many, many generations. His life story to help people come to know God. And so that's what we're wanting to do here. We want to highlight the fact that no matter where you are, you may not know God, you may know God and just be really struggling, be in a dark time in your life. And the point is for us to show how God is still there. God is still cares. He's still working. God is going to bring good, like the Bible says, out of every situation for those that know him and love him. So thank you for tuning in whenever and wherever you might be hearing this. And I'd like to introduce my guest now, Pastor Joe Paskewich. Thank you for being here this evening. Pastor Joe has been a pastor in the Southeastern Connecticut area with the Calvary Chapel movement for many, many, many years now.
For a long time.
Yep. And just very active in the church and also missions and many other organizations and outreaches. So it's very special to have you here, and looking forward to getting to your story more. So,
well, good. Thanks. I'm glad to be here. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, and maybe later on we'll talk more about what you're doing right now in your life and how God is leading you. But for now, let's get into your story. Yeah. Why don't you tell us where you're from? Are you from this area, Connecticut?
I am from this area. I live maybe 4 blocks from where I grew up.
Okay.
In fact, I own a house. I rent it out. I own a house next door to where I grew up.
In New London?
In New London. Mm-hmm. I was born in New London, and I live in New London now.
Okay, yeah.
I've been a lot of places in between. I can tell you that. But yes, I'm from here.
Okay, so when you were growing up, were you in a religious home at all? Were you in a Christian home, or?
I was in a religious home, to some degree. My family was Catholic. Mm-hmm. They made us go to church. We did. It got to the place where they would drop us off at church, at the Catholic church, and they would give us money to put in the basket. And myself and some of my other friends figured it out that they had dropped us off and we had money. So we used to go to Howard Johnson's and have breakfast.
Nobody knew, right?
Nobody knew. This may be the first time some people are finding that out.
Okay.
So, I grew up in the Catholic Church. I didn't understand it. I don't put any blame on them or point a finger at them, but I remember growing up in the Catholic Church and seeing Jesus on that cross. Mm-hmm. And I was always attracted to Jesus. Mm-hmm. Didn't make sense to me a whole lot. I believe that he was the sort of hero, political, die for his cause kind of a guy.
Yeah.
You know, the one that everybody, the one that everybody should sort of be, stood up to power, all that kind of stuff. And so I liked Jesus, and there were times in my life that I thought, I would like to be like him. And there were a few times I tried to sort of be like him, but it was pretty difficult, and nobody else wanted to be like him. So you just sort of, by yourself trying to be like Jesus. But I always liked Jesus, but I did not know God, and it became very evident at certain points in my life that I did not know God.
Yeah. Okay, so you went to church on a somewhat regular basis? On
a somewhat regular basis. I did a first communion. I did a confirmation. I didn't learn until I was an adult that like confirmation is supposed to be that you're confirming the faith of your parents.
Right.
I didn't know that.
Right.
I wasn't confirming anything.
Yeah, it was just kind of the routine thing.
Yeah.
So with your, growing up, your parents, did you have anybody in your life close to you that was like a real serious follower of the Lord or of the Bible, or was it just the routine, just kind of like the standard quo Catholic?
Yeah, not until growing up to 11, 12, 13 there. I didn't know anybody that was really even committed to the liturgical church as such. I don't think any of us were against it necessarily, but I don't remember anybody in my circles being religious, let alone people who would say that they know God.
Right.
So
yeah. Okay, so during that time in growing up, you had this view of who Jesus was, a revolutionary.
Yeah, I like Jesus.
And just kind of going along with the flow of the world and the generation that you lived in. So there wasn't any other real connection to God that was kind of really compelling you to live a certain way. It was more society-centered or self-centered. If I was to ask you, what was your purpose at that time? What was going on in your mind? What were you living for? What was it when you were young?
I think we were just floating.
Yeah.
I don't think we were. I don't think any of my companions at that time, up until I was a preteen, I don't remember any of us even thinking about college, let alone the meaning of life.
Right.
We were just floating, just living, doing whatever we did.
Yeah.
Never occurred to me or my companions to be interested in those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But neither were we against them.
Right. Now, at some point along the line, that changed, right?
That definitely changed.
Yeah. When did that change?
Well, that changed when I found Christ.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was 20 years old.
Okay.
But a lot happened before then.
Yeah, do you want to share
maybe
some things that led up to that event?
Yeah, a little bit. My friends in the neighborhood that I lived in, my father was a cop, 17 years. And my other friend, his dad was in the National Guard, and we used to steal all their bullets and stuff. We were we were pretty mischievous in making guns and stealing their stuff. And I think I was about 13 years old when I actually ended up getting shot in the leg with a bullet, and that kind of changed the whole course of my life.
Okay.
Because what happened was kind of weird. The moms in the neighborhood didn't want any of their kids hanging around with me. We were all
somebody might get shot, maybe.
Yeah, we were all doing it,
yeah.
But I was the one that, So I found myself in an unusual place, and I've tried to figure out the timeline, But I think it was maybe 13, maybe 14, somewhere thereabouts. that I found myself where I couldn't hang around with anybody in my neighborhood. And we lived in one of those neighborhoods where you'd crisscross yards to go.
Right.
We're outside all the
tight.
time.
Yeah.
We used to come in when the street lights went on. Mm-hmm. It was time to come in. And so everybody got along. Everything was great until I couldn't be near anybody because I was dangerous. and I actually had this memory of leaving the neighborhood looking for people to hang around with. It was bizarre. Mm-hmm. And I met some of the most interesting people. I met a lot of people whose parents didn't care where they were. Mm-hmm. And so they introduced me to all kinds of stuff. Smoking pot, hopping trains, mm-hmm. stealing stuff, doing crazy things. And so that kind of became my circle. I just found myself with people that were doing drugs and petty crime. They weren't robbing banks or anything.
You're just looking for something exciting to do.
Yeah, the rush. We're always like, what's the next rush? And got into smoking pot. Sold drugs a little bit, and so I got to the place where I was 15, and I was from a law enforcement family.
Yeah, right.
My dad was a cop. Mm-hmm. My sister worked for the municipality, worked for the city. My uncle was the captain of the police force.
Okay.
My cousin was an FBI guy. So here I am, like dabbling in all this other kind of stuff. And by the time I was 15, I was pretty gone. Mm-hmm. Getting in fights with cops, getting drunk, getting high. And by the time I was 15 years old, I left my house. Mm-hmm. And I never went back. I never went back until I found Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so I had this tenuous relationship with my family, because my family was a good family. I came from a really good family. Mm-hmm. And I was just this really bad guy.
What?
I dropped out of.
So you came from a good family. Like, what possessed you to be like that?
Just what was I going to do?
Just too much freedom for you to.
I couldn't hang around with anybody in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Okay.
So I was just hanging around with all these other guys.
But I mean, what was we don't have to dwell on it. But was there anything back then, looking back now, that compelled you to kind of get into all that mischief, or?
It was just the next opportunity in front of me.
Okay.
I mean, those are the people that accepted me.
Yeah.
I'd been rejected by everybody else, mm-hmm. and so they were accepting me. So that's who I hung out with.
Okay, so you hopped on a train and you took off?
No, not exactly. We used to hop the trains. We'd hop the trains, ride them for a while, jump off of them.
I think you did go out west at some point, right?
I definitely went out west. So I'm an 8th grade graduate. I graduate. You're supposed to go yes.
Congratulations.
All right, I'll say it. We'll try that again. Yeah. I'm an 8th grade graduate.
Yeah, congratulations. I'm impressed.
I tried 9th grade 6 times. I went to the public school. I got kicked out of it. I went to the public alternative school. I got kicked out of that. Mm-hmm. I went to St. Bernard's, the Catholic school, the boys' school. I got kicked out of that for smoking pot. I went to an alternative school that a guy from St. Bernard's had started. I got kicked out of that. I went to a school, the state paid me to go to school, an auto mechanics school. Mm-hmm. Paid me to go there. And I couldn't make it through there. And then I went to a place that was a little more confining. Mm-hmm. And that didn't work either.
Okay, they kicked you out of there too.
They didn't kick me out. So by the time I was 15, 16, I was on my own, living around, couch surfing, living different places, mm-hmm. and I found myself by the time I was, 18, 19. I do have to say, because it's really true, that there's a period of my life somewhere there between 16 and 20 where I haven't been able to piece it together. Mm-hmm. I did like so many drugs and such,
you just don't even remember
such
what
crazy
happened.
Living. I try to piece it together, like I definitely can't do a month by month chronology mm-hmm. of like what happened in my life, during those intervening years.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I was 20 years old that I found Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sounds like during that time, 16 to 20, you didn't have like any purpose, really. I mean,
I had no purpose at all.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have thought that like I was a revolutionary, but I was contrary. You know, and somehow like being contrary is being like
right. You had no
like,
positive
like
view.
Big, you know.
Yeah,
like,
no
you know,
positive view of building anything.
No.
Just being rebellious and just,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I hung around with rebellious people.
Right.
You know, crazy stories, crazy things. You know.
Okay. Well, start talking about how did that change?
Well, it all changed when I came to know Jesus.
Okay, we'll start talking about that. How did that come about?
I'm so glad I found Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, so a few things. I'll tell you a story. I did not ever know a person that said that they had found Jesus, and I found myself at a point in my life where I was hungry for spiritual things. And I was living with this girl. And hungry for spiritual things. And I only read one book. I read a book called Siddhartha, which was Hermann Hesse. It was this sort of Buddhist, you know, search for meaning. And it made sense to me, you know, that there's something more there. There's a better life to live. There's a way to live. And so I was sort of impacted by that. And I was at a grocery store with this girl I lived with, and she went in the grocery store. And there was this Hare Krishna guy, and he was selling books. And I bought the book. I paid pretty good money for the book. And when she came out of the grocery store, she said, "What's that?" And I said, "It's a book." And I said, "It's a holy book." And she said, "What in the world do you mean it's a holy book?" I said, "It's a holy book." I said, there's something special about it. There's something holy about it. And she said, "Well, why would you say it's holy?" And I said, "Look," I said, "smell this book. Like this book even like smells." And so she smelt it, and she said, "What are you, an idiot?" She said, "It came out of a bag with incense." She said, "You're an idiot." And so, so that's a true story. Yeah. But I was spiritually hungry.
Wow.
I was spiritually hungry, and it turned out we lived in this cabin, you know, and dogs and fireplace, and you know, just like living like hippies. And her sister came to Christ like out of nowhere. Just, at least for me, out of nowhere. I didn't know anything about it. And so I had read Hermann Hesse. I was interested in the Holy Book, you know, that smelt good. And she came over to my house, and she said, she just came right out and said it. There was no like, "How you guys doing?" It was she was like, "Joe, you need to get born again." And I said, "You know what? I was just reading about that." And I said, "I do need to get born again." So, but I'm thinking about reincarnation.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about, you know, born again. And I was like, wow, like something's happening. You know, like you're talking about it, I'm talking about it. Need to get born again. And she said, "If anybody needs to be born again, you do." And I said, "I know." I said, I've really been thinking about this stuff. And she said, "You should do it right now." And I was like, "What? What should I do right now?" And she said, "You should get born again right now." And I said, I don't want to get born again right now." I thought she was telling me to like kill myself.
Die,
You know, and I had like, I was pretty desperate. I had suicidal thoughts. So I'm kind of, you know, looking for spiritual things, got these sort of suicidal thoughts. And this girl's coming over like insisting that I get born again now. And I said, "I don't want to. I really don't want to." And she said, "But you need to." I said, "I know." You know, we're having this like argument. And she said this to me. She said, would you come with me to church on Sunday and do it there?" And I said, "All right, I'll do it." Because I was like so freaked out. I was like, this is crazy. And so she did come to pick me up that Sunday, but I hid. I hid in the closet because I did not want to go. And I was bad, you know, and I was desperate, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't quite ready for that. But I will say that I was suicidal, and I attempted suicide, and I couldn't even do that right. The way that I did it, I lived in this house. We had this gas stove, and I was going to wait for a time when nobody was around, and I was going to do it to the dogs too. We had the dogs, and so I was going to turn off the pilot and just let the gas go, and just turn it up, open the oven, and so I got myself a bottle of brandy, and I had it in my back pocket. And I'm getting the stove all ready, and I tripped in the kitchen, and my bottle of brandy broke. Because I was just going to pass out. I was going to drink till I passed out. Because I was afraid to even kill myself.
Right.
So I needed, and I thought, you're such a loser. Like you can't even kill yourself, right? And it was pretty desperate. I was pretty desperate, and so we ended up moving to Arizona. And it was there that I started to have a mental breakdown. So the guy I lived with, he's in the church that I started now. Like neither one of us were Christians. And this guy, he almost killed me one time, but he's now a Christian. But we lived with him in Arizona, and in the middle of the day, I don't know, something like weekday, I'm on the swings outside with this girl in Arizona, in the heat, Tucson, Arizona. And I think it was one of those times when people were praying for me, I think. And I just started crying. I was crying. And she said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I'm going to hell." I'm like, I am going to hell. And she said, "You are one sick human being. You are going to hell by yourself. Goodbye." And she left. She just left. That was it.
Very encouraging comment.
My life was falling apart, like everything about it, just everything about my life was just completely falling apart. And so I don't remember the whole chronology of, I just moved out of the house with that guy. I don't think I even told him I left. I left. And I didn't know where I was going somewhere. I was in Arizona, and so I just started to bounce around. And I thought, you know what? Like I'm still like spiritually hungry, and I didn't know the words spiritually hungry.
Sure, yeah, you were just
I didn't have language like that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But I remembered, I grew up Catholic, and I remember I was in Arizona on an overpass, and I thought, you know what? Like, join a monastery. Like, that's what you need to do. Like, you need to join a monastery. This is how sick I am. I'm like this mentally ill guy.
Well, I mean, in your mind, that was like the thing where you can find like
peace.
Who's really spiritual.
Yeah, that's right. And so I called up a monastery, and I said I want to join the monastery. And they said, well, it's not quite that simple. And I don't remember what they told me. I said, well, I just want to join. Like I don't know about it. Can I just like join?
Right.
And they said, well, no, you can't. You can't really join. But they didn't give me any advice. You know what I mean? Like, why don't you call 911 and see if the police will
they'll give you somewhere to stay.
I didn't do anything, and so, but I was desperate, right? So. And it's growing like this whole sort of spiritual emptiness, and I can call it that now. Like it was just growing, and it was severe. It was like really severe, just knowing that like you are like one doomed human being, useful to nobody, got nothing to offer, nowhere to go, and so I just started to bounce around the USA.
Wow.
I went wherever I went. Had long hair, starting to get natted and sleep in different places, twigs in my hair, and when you see homeless people that look homeless, that was me.
Yeah.
That was me.
And you're just searching.
I
don't really know.
I don't.
You had like no purpose, no
you know,
drive. You just kind of floating around.
I don't want to say I was searching because like people say that, and I hear people's stories.
Well, I think you were, though, but you didn't know that you were.
I certainly didn't know that I was.
Yeah.
I knew I was desperate. I knew I was like a doomed human being, and I knew I was never going to be like my dad or like anybody else. Like people that had normal lives. To have to have cars. I just. I had all of that and I lost all of that. And I just thought I don't have anything to do.
So how long were you sort of wandering for?
For a while, bouncing around the USA, trying to figure out, what to do, just bouncing from one place to the next.
And you're 20, right?
I think I was 20. Yeah, I was 20 years old. I don't know. I think it was October, Like I've tried to sort it out and try to go back and figure out, what was when. But I was in St. Louis, Missouri, hitchhiking. And I was hitchhiking, it was early in the morning, 6 o'clock, maybe earlier, maybe 7, I don't know what time it was. But St. Louis, Missouri, and it was kind of rush hour, a lot of cars, and there were like 6 lanes of traffic. And so I was walking with my back. Everybody used to hitchhike then.
Yeah.
It was a thing. Hitchhiking was a thing. And so I was walking with my back to the cars because I thought nobody's going to pick me up here, but I might as well give it a try anyway. So I had my thumb out, and there was a van all the way like in the furthest lane out that pulled into the next lane, and I was like, man, that guy's crazy, just pulling into the next lane. And then he pulled into the next one, and he did it all the way down, like until he came finally to the shoulder of the road. And St. Louis, Missouri, I don't know if you've been in those places, but it's flat. You can see forever. It was probably 3/4 of a mile down the road, maybe longer, and I could see the van pull over. And the door opened up, and I saw this guy. He came out, long-haired guy, and his hair went, and he went. And I thought, you know what? Like, you are like one burnt out individual, but you are not getting in that van. Like, that was my self-talk. Like, do not ride with those people. I don't know who they are, but don't ride with that guy. And so I just continued to like keep my thumb out, and I walked all the way up there, and they got the van door open, and they said, where are you going? And I said, where are you going? And they said, we're going to Connecticut. And I said, well, I'll go to Connecticut too. I'm going to Connecticut. Yeah. And they said, okay. So we got in the van, and there's a guy driving. There's a girl in the passenger seat, and there's a guy in the back, the long-haired guy. And the girl sitting in the chair, she's looking at me like grinning. Just grinning and grinning and grinning and grinning and grinning. And she said, God told us to pick you up. And I thought, I'm dead. Like I knew I should not have taken a ride with these people, because this is the Manson era.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And I got like this girl grinning, telling me God told them to pick me up. And so I was like, I don't know what to do here. Like, I'm just like, whatever they, and I'm committed to Connecticut with them, Right. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do? So the guy in the back, he's got a guitar, and he said, do you want me to sing you a song? I thought, I am like a lunatic, and these guys are like over the top. Like, this man wants to sing a song to me?
And I just got in the van with him, yeah.
And that God told him?
Yeah.
So I said, yeah. I said, sing me a song. That'd be great. And he sang this song that said, the line was, accept him with your whole heart, and with your own 2 hands, with one reach out to Jesus, and with the other bring a friend. And I'm pretty convinced that was my conversion moment. That like when he said that line, you know, with one hand reach out to Jesus and with the other bring a friend, I was like, I think that's what I want. I think that's it.
Wow.
And so looking back, like, I don't know, you know, how conversion works and you know, exactly at what moment, but I think that might have been it. It definitely was faith the size of a mustard seed. I can tell you that, you know. And so I spent quite a bit of time with them in that van. I probably spent, the van was broken. The radiator there was something wrong with the radiator. So if he went over 45 miles an hour, it would overheat. So they just kept it. So we're like riding slow all the way to Connecticut. We're going to drive.
Yeah.
We didn't drive to Connecticut, but and they read the Bible to me. They stopped at the college campus and they said, "Hey, you want to go with us and tell people about Jesus?" And I was like, "All right, you know, like, how do you do that?" And so they stopped at this college campus. They were the friendliest people I'd ever met, and they were telling people about Jesus. And I felt good about it. I felt good about like being there, telling them about Jesus. I didn't tell them about Jesus. I never said a word to these guys. I never said a word. But I was with them watching them do that. And so you might not buy that this was like a real important moment to me. But these guys were like, they were like children. They were so innocent and so pure that I was like, I gotta have what those guys have, like just this, the purity, the way they treated that girl. What happened with that girl, she had lived in Connecticut and she had moved to California, got saved in the Jesus movement. And she was coming back to Connecticut to tell her family about Jesus. And this other guy in the back, he had written a book and he was coming back east to see his publisher. And the other guy, he was like, "I'll just drive everybody." The guy that owned the van, you know, he was like, "I got the van, I'll drive everybody." And so the way that they treated this girl, I'd like never seen it, you know, where they treated her like a sister, you know, with this like purity. And like the guys I hung around with are pigs.
Right.
You know, and so I didn't know people like this.
Yeah.
And it was, I tell you, it was really, really attractive. Really attractive.
Yeah, you could sense the light inside of them, you know.
I wouldn't have called it that then.
Right. But no, I do believe what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely.
So they talked to me.
So you went evangelizing with them, basically.
Yeah, I did. I watched what they did, but I didn't know what they were doing. You know, it didn't make sense to me. But they felt confident enough to just pull into a campus, and they went into the student center, were playing pool and talking to other kids. And when the kids would come in and play pool, they'd talk to them about Jesus, and they were giving them stuff.
Right.
You know, like now I know what all that stuff is, but you know, I didn't know then.
When you were in the van and was that Steve playing the guitar?
Steve Gregg.
Okay.
That's right, Steve Gregg.
Yeah.
You know Steve Gregg.
I know. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I have not met him personally, but I've heard a lot about him,
Yeah.
and I've benefited from some of his teaching online and everything. But so when you heard that line about reaching out to God and bring a friend, and you say, "I think
to Jesus,
that was,
not to God, to Jesus."
Okay.
And I think it was important that it was like with one hand reach out to Jesus, because maybe God might not have even done it for me. You know, I'd like that specific like Jesus thing.
Yeah.
You know, really the name.
Right. So what happened? Like when you look back at that now and you say, "I think that was the moment of my conversion." Like what happened that makes you think that something really deep inside of you happened? Like from that moment on, what was the thing that changed in your life?
Jesus, you know, and they did they read through Proverbs, they did some other stuff, and this guy that was driving, he was going to stop off in Chicago and see his family because I think his dad had died or something. I don't know something, but and they invited me. They said, "Hey, you want to come? You know, you can stay with us." But I had long hair, was natty, stunk, and I was like, "No, you know, like if I get in a house, like people don't want a stinky guy in a house." So I told them, "No, you know, I don't want to do that." And so they dropped me off on the highway outside of Chicago, 2:00 in the morning. Just dropped me off. And as soon as they dropped me off, they drove away a little bit. And then the van door opened up again, and it was Steve jumped out. And like now I would have known, well, that would have been the moment to say, hey, you know, like you want to accept Christ. But he said, hey, Joe, see you later, and closed the door, and they took off. So I don't know which moment it was, because as soon as they drove away, I said, Jesus, I want what they have, and I know that it's you.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know, was it like that moment? Like that's the moment that like my heart like caught on fire. You know, when he said that, I was like, it was crazy. And so I gave my life to Christ. When I tell the story, I say I did it 2 o'clock in the morning, but I think it might have been at that particular moment. But my heart was burning, man.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? Talk more about, what do you mean your heart caught on fire? What do you mean?
I think you have to taste and see that the Lord is good, you know?
Yeah.
You have to experience it, you know? I mean, what I was experiencing was like peace was coming over me. I was overwhelmed by peace. I knew that I belonged to Jesus. I don't know how I knew that. I just knew that I knew that I knew. And I continued on my journey in the morning.
Which means a lot, you know, which means a lot coming from where you were coming from, being a person that you're just sort of alone and you can't find friends, and what is my purpose?
Yeah.
You know, just wandering, and all of a sudden now you know God is reaching out to you, and that you belong to Him now.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that you're here, and yeah, you can imagine that lighting your heart on fire.
It did. Yeah. And I knew that I knew Jesus. And in the morning, I just picked up what I did. I was hitchhiking, and I got a ride from a guy who had just got out of the service, and he was going home. And again, it was early in the morning that he picked me up, and he had Coors beer. And at that time, you could only get Coors on the other side of the Mississippi River because it had to be shipped cold or something, you know. And so he said, do you drink? I said, oh yeah. So I'm drinking Coors beer like 6 o'clock in the morning with this guy. And then he said, do you smoke? And I said, yeah. I said, I just smoke like anything. So this is absolutely true. So he was smoking pot. And I'm talking to him, and he's talking to me. And I still have the vivid memory of this happening. I said, I just gave my life to Jesus Christ. This is absolutely true.
Yeah.
And I handed it to him, and he said, you know, some of my friends in the service, like they told me that like that had happened to them. And he said, what's that like? And I said, you have peace like you couldn't possibly imagine. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
But then all of that, like it just felt like it just needed to not do that. You know, just like I was like, why? I don't need to do that. Like, why am I doing that? So I don't need to do it. And so I did come back to Connecticut. Like I remember that with one hand reach out to Jesus and with the other bring a friend. And so I knew at like that moment at 2 o'clock in the morning that like I need to go tell everybody about this. I need to go tell everybody about what I found. So I was bouncing around. I didn't know anything. I didn't have a Bible or anything. And I remember I was in Boston, and I saw a store that said Christian Science Reading Room. And I was like, I'm a Christian.
Right.
I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
So I went in there. I was talking to the lady, you know, about like what happened to me. And I said, man, like, you know, like I'm a Christian now. You know, I found Jesus on the highway. And this lady was like, you know, and I was like, I don't know, like I was like, I thought we would have had like a bigger bond, you know. But I left. So I went home, and I knew I needed to tell people about Jesus. And my relationship with my dad was like, so another probably 2 o'clock in the morning, I end up in Connecticut, and I go to my dad's house, and I knocked on the door in the middle of the night. And my dad's like, who is it? And I said, it's me. He said, who? I said, Joey. He said, what do you want? And I said, Dad, I got something I need to tell you. And he said, what do you got to tell me? I said, Dad, you're going to hell. And he said, this is what he said to me. He said, can we go to hell in the morning? Why don't you come back? So I said, all right. So I came back, you know, and I think he thought I was whacked out on drugs. You know, I think he might have been afraid of me, you know, to think, because I'm all matted hair, you know, got twigs, you know, Dad, you're going to hell, you know, and I'm with Jesus now, Dad.
Right.
You know, all right, you know, so where you going? You don't want to stay here, do you?
Right.
So I got to tell you this part, because this is crazy. I called the girl, right, that I knew, and I said, hey, I want to see you. And she said, I want to see you. And so she drove down to see me, and she said she was praying on the way down, you know, that salvation might enter our, because I'm calling her, you know, the girl that wanted me to get born again.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and so I called her, and I went out to her car. I saw her car, and I said, I said, you know, I know Jesus now. And she was like, it's so amazing. She said, you want to go to a meeting? And so she took me to New Haven to a meeting. And I don't know, you know, went to this meeting, and people were singing, and people were praying for each other. And I think it turned out, I think it was like, I don't know if it was a Salvation Army meeting, or I think it might have been a Pentecostal meeting. Because people were putting hands on each other and praying for them, like doing that thing, you know, where you put their hand on them. And I went over and put my hand on somebody. Twigs.
Yeah.
But that was my
going with it,
that was my introduction to the Christian life. And they said afterwards, they said at the end of the meeting, they were like, hey, we're going to go get something to drink. You want to go? And I was like, yeah. And I thought they were talking about drinking. Right. You know, and so I was like, yeah, you know, Jesus and drinking too. You know, like, this is cool. But they were all talking about coffee.
Yeah,
you know, they were drinking coffee. So I started to drink tea, because my mom drank tea. My mom drank tea. But I have to tell you this part. She took me to a meeting. She took me to a church, a little church called the Burning Bush. And it was mostly all young people. It was all young people. And they had some chairs, but most of the people were sitting on the floor, and it was a small building. And the guy, he used to sing songs on a guitar, and then he would just teach through the Bible line by line. He would just read through the Bible, say some stuff about it, read some more. And so I'd gone with her a few times. We used to go on Mondays and Friday nights. That's when the church met, Monday night and Friday night. And I was there one day, and sitting on the floor, and this guy, he would play the guitar, he would read through the Bible, and then every time he would say, you know, if you want to come to know Jesus today, you know, this is your day, and somebody would always do it. I thought that was normal, like just play the guitar, read the Bible, and then people are going to just get so excited about this, and that they're going to say yes, because it happened every single time. So he said, I'm going to do it a little different this time. He said, a lot of times I ask you to raise your hand. He said, this time, if you know you're born again, put your hand up. And this guy, he's in his 50s. All these guys are in their 20s, you know, probably a few guys in their 30s. So I put my hand up. And I heard somebody go, hey, Joe, hey. And I turned around, and it's these people that picked me up in the van and dropped me off in Chicago. Yeah. It's Steve Gregg going.
Yeah. Nice.
And they came up to me afterwards, like, I wanted to see these guys, man. I was so excited when the meeting was over. You know, I went over to him, and Steve said, it's really good to see some fruit. And I thought, what are you talking about? Like, fruit? Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Why would you call me a fruit? and so I had this like, gee, I'm so happy to see you guys, but like, I don't remember you like being that rude, you know, that you would like say something like that to me. I was really offended by it. I didn't know what that meant.
Right, yeah.
Fruit?
Yeah.
What was he doing?
Right.
And so it was Steve who told me, he said, I'm gonna work with you, you know, and they were going back to the West Coast the next day, because that girl, they were looking for a church for her to go to. And before they left, and so they dropped her off at that church, and they said, you know, it's a good church for you. and they were going back the next day. But Steve said, I'm gonna try to stick with you a little bit, and help you grow in this thing. And he gave me some really good advice, really good advice. He said, now that you're a Christian, he said, get prepared, because all kinds of people are going to have all kinds of trips that they're going to lay on you. He said, but you just always remember Jesus. Mm-hmm. Just always remember Jesus. Mm-hmm. I said, I'll do that, Steve. I'll just always remember Jesus. Mm-hmm. He said, people are going to come up. He said, you're going to be amazed what they're going to be telling you to do. Mm-hmm. He said, just remember Jesus. Mm-hmm. Jesus in the Bible, he said. Because he was a verse-by-verse guy, and he was like, just stick with the Bible.
And
so that's
he's
my
talking
story.
About different religions or religious things. That
I think he was
people
talking
are
about. I think he was telling me about Christian people.
Yeah.
And he was right. Like I'd never met a Christian person, and within the first couple of months of being a Christian, people had all kinds of things they wanted me to do. All kinds of churches they wanted me to go to. Like I got to go over to this church, and get baptized in the Spirit. Like I need to go over to this church and get a haircut. I need to go over to this church, and like everybody had, everybody had like something, some trip, like somehow, they were going to bring me in. And I think that's what Steve was talking about. Like, just stick with Jesus. Stick with Jesus. You'll be all right.
So, wow. Okay. So there's so much that has happened in your life since then. I mean, how long ago was that now?
That was 50 years.
Wow.
I'm 70 years old, so that's when I was 20 years old.
So maybe another time we can have you come on and talk more about like how God has worked in your life throughout all of those years. But believe it or not, the time is going to be ending here.
I see that, yeah.
Pretty quickly. So maybe just can we take some time to talk about? I don't know if you want to go maybe a little bit further in how your life changed even more so in the year after that or coming years after that. Maybe we can either go that way or maybe just talk about. Reflect on like what Jesus obviously saved your life.
Jesus saved my life.
The story that you just
Jesus
shared.
saved my life.
He did. Yeah. He saved you from taking your life.
He did save me from taking my life.
But then he gave you real life though.
He gave me real life.
Not just so that you would survive, but so that you would thrive.
That's right.
And so do you want to talk a little bit more about like what happened shortly after that time, or maybe just summarize as a whole like those moments, that one trip that you took in that van, and that exchange, between you and Jesus grabbing his hand, that's never left you. That's
never left me. That's what I came back to do. I came back to tell my friends about Jesus, and that's what we did, and. That's how I started a church. I started a church with never having been on the staff of a church, never had been an elder in a church, taught a few Bible studies here and there, but not really. Telling my friends about Jesus. It really was the blind leading the blind. But I say in the land of the blind, the one-eyed made us king. So I was a little bit ahead of everybody else. And we learned together how to patch together a church, and it worked. Yeah, it happened. We grew into a church.
Was that the beginning of Calvary Chapel?
It was the beginning of Calvary Chapel. Okay. Yep. We started in our living room. Started in our living room, and so I'm finishing up, right? So I'm 70, and it's time for me to just move on and give it to somebody else, because my whole thing was friends. So they brought a girl up this week. She's graduating high school, and she's going to Mississippi to be in a Christian ballet ministry. And but she grew up in the church. She grew up in the church, and then it occurred to me, like her mom. I went up to her mom later, because it's the only church I think that this girl has ever been in, right? But her mom, I said, you know what? I went up to her later and I said, when we started the church in our living room, I said, you used to come with your dad, didn't you? She said, when I was 7 years old, I used to go to your house when it was meeting in your house. And she said, but when I turned into a teen, she said, you didn't have like any teen group. And she said, so our family went to another church. And so, but then there's her daughter, like going off to ministry. So I'm like, it's amazing like what God has done. Like we've seen 1,000 people come to Christ. You know, I've ministered in 18 countries, some of them a couple of times. You know, I've been a police chaplain, a disaster relief chaplain.
I know there's so much that has happened in your life. I want to hear a little bit more though, just with a few
you want to
minutes.
go back to
No, I want to
the
hear
conversion.
more like for you personally, aside from ministry, but just you personally. We got like 2 minutes. This thing happened to you when you were 20 years old.
Yes.
It's never left. He's
never
left you. You've never left
No.
him. I'm sure there's been so many trials and difficulties and all through those years, but from that day, from that moment back then up until now, like what is if you were to summarize, you know, what Jesus has done in your life, what would you say?
I'd say I never forget, and I remind people all the time that I'm just a homeless guy. And Jesus changed my life and gave me a life like I'll put my life up against anybody's life as far as like being blessed and having done things, seen things. I just try to keep it simple, man. I'm just a homeless guy that Jesus rescued. And you know, 2 Corinthians 5:17, Jesus changed my life. Old things have passed away. All things have become new. And honestly, Lee, I try to not ever move from that spot. That's where I stay.
For anyone who's watching who might be where you were when you were 20 years old, what would you say to them?
I'd say just give your life to Jesus. Why would you not give your life to Jesus? Why would you not? And I would say, and I said this to a dying guy the other day, he said, if you've come here to convert me, he said, it ain't gonna happen. He said, I'm so sick of religion. And I said, abandon religion and do what Jesus said. Jesus said, follow me. I said, does that make sense to you? He said, that makes sense to me. I said, follow Jesus.
Yeah.
Just follow Jesus. He'll work it out.
It's not about religion.
It's not about
religion.
religion.
A relationship. Right?
It's about a relationship with Jesus.
It's about coming to know him.
And it says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Like you have to do it. You have to step over, and then you'll be amazed to see that he will give you new life, peace,
Amen.
And a life like you could never imagine.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Love you, man.
Joe. You too. We'll have to have you back on so you can talk about how the Lord's worked in all those other years we didn't get to tonight. But thank you for joining us whenever that might be. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Ask Jesus to come into your life, to come in your heart, and he will. The Bible says that he will be found of you if you search for him with all of your heart and all of your mind. All right, God bless you. Remember, he's chasing after you. God bless everyone. See you next time.
Amen. So